a vast, empty horizon. The sky is a pale, flat gray. A lone, rickety farmhouse stands against the emptiness. A simple wooden fence is nearly buried in waves of fine, dark soil. This is the image we all know. The Dust Bowl. A decade of drought and despair. A chapter of American history written in dust. The Great Betrayal. How America buried its own breadbasket. But that story is incomplete. It's a comfortable lie we tell ourselves. The truth is far more unsettling. This was not just an act of God. This was a man-made catastrophe. A story of greed. A story of betrayal. This is the story of how America's breadbasket collapsed. And it didn't begin with a lack of rain. It began with a promise. Sun-drenched footage. Fields of tall, native prairie grass wave in a gentle breeze. The land looks lush, untamed. Before the dust, this was the great American desert. A sea of grass. Its roots ran deep. For centuries, they held the soil in place. This was a delicate, balanced world. Then, the settlers came. They saw something different. They didn't see a fragile ecosystem. They saw profit. A hand points to a map of the Great Plains. A promotional poster on the wall reads, "The last frontier. Own your own farm." Washington called it the last frontier. Land was cheap. The government practically gave it away. Railroads ran advertisements across the country. They sold a dream of fertile land, a new Eden in the American West. They repeated a dangerous myth. Rain follows the plow. The very act of farming, they claimed, would change the climate. It would bring the rain. A farmer stands proudly next to a new steam-powered tractor. The machine looks alien against the prairie. Then came the war. World War I. Europe was starving. America needed to feed the Allies. A new slogan emerged. Wheat will win the war. Patriotism and profit became one. The price of wheat skyrocketed. From 90 cents a bushel to over $2. A fortune was waiting. It was buried just beneath the grass. Rows of tractors advance in a line. They tear through the ancient sod. The dark, rich topsoil is exposed to the sun for the first time. This was the great plow-up, a frenzy of cultivation. Farmers became speculators. They took out massive loans. They bought more land. They bought bigger tractors. They tore up every inch of grass they could find. In a single decade, they plowed under millions of acres. More land than had been settled in the entire history of the country. They were hailed as heroes, pioneers feeding the world. No one listened to the warnings. No one saw the danger they were unleashing. The land was stripped bare. Its ancient armor was gone. It was naked, vulnerable, waiting, chaos, men shouting, ticker tape flying. The date, October 29, 1929, flashes on screen. The Roaring Twenties ended with a crash. The Great Depression began. The world economy buckled. The demand for American wheat vanished. Prices collapsed. A bushel that once sold for $2 now fetched 40 cents. Farmers who were rich on paper were suddenly ruined. They were trapped in debt. They had to plow even more land. They had to plant more wheat. Just to break even. They prayed for a miracle. They prayed for rain. And then the rain stopped. A parched field. The soil is cracked and dry. A farmer looks up at a cloudless, metallic sky. 1931. A year of drought. Then another. And another. The sun baked the exposed topsoil. It turned the rich earth into fine, weightless powder. The gentle breezes of the plains began to pick it up. At first, they were just dusters, annoyances. Then the wind grew stronger. A massive, rolling wall of black dust approaches a small town. It looks like a mountain range moving across the plains. People run for cover. The sky turned black. They called them black blizzards, storms of earth. They blotted out the sun at midday. The dust was inescapable. It seeped through every crack. It covered furniture. It coated food. It filled lungs. Children and the elderly developed dust pneumonia, a new, deadly sickness. The land they had conquered was now consuming them. A woman stuffs wet rags into the window frames. The room is dark, hazy with dust. The sound of wind and grit hitting the glass is constant. This is where the story of resilience begins, the untold part of the tragedy. Many fled, but many more stayed. They refused to surrender. They learned to survive in a world turned upside down. They sealed their homes with gummed tape and wet sheets. They wore masks soaked in water. They tied guide ropes from the house to the barn, a lifeline to avoid getting lost in the blackness. Communities banded together. They shared what little they had. They held dances in dusty halls, a desperate attempt to maintain their humanity. A family's belongings are piled outside their home. A banker in a suit nails a foreclosure sign to the door. The family watches, defeated. But survival was met with betrayal. The very banks that had pushed easy loans now came to collect. They showed no mercy. A lifetime of work could be erased with the swing of a hammer. This wasn't weather. This was business. For thousands, this was the final blow. They lost their land, their homes, their identity. An overloaded jalopy, a Ford Model A, struggles down a dusty road. A family is crammed inside, their faces etched with worry and hope. They became migrants in their own country, the Okies, a term of derision. They packed everything they owned into broken-down cars. They headed west, chasing a rumor of green fields and jobs in California. Handbills promised a new life. It was the same promise that had lured them to the plains. And it was another lie. A sign reads, "No jobs in California. Keep out." A grim-faced police officer turns a migrant car away. California saw them as invaders. They were met with hostility. The Associated Farmers of California, a powerful group of landowners, feared the migrants would drive down wages. They were branded as vagrants, troublemakers. They were blocked at the border. Their camps were burned. This was the ultimate betrayal. Fellow Americans turned away in their hour of greatest need. An even larger, more terrifying dust storm fills the entire frame. The date, April 14, 1935, appears on screen. Back on the plains, the apocalypse arrived. April 14, 1935. Black Sunday. The worst dust storm in history. A single storm that moved 200 million tons of topsoil. It traveled 2,000 miles. It darkened the skies over Chicago, over New York. It even dusted ships hundreds of miles out in the Atlantic. The Dust Bowl was no longer a regional problem. It had become a national shame. And it finally reached the one place where change could begin. Washington, D.C. man Hugh Hammond Bennett stands before a committee of skeptical senators. This man is Hugh Hammond Bennett, a soil scientist. For years, he was a lone voice. He warned that America was destroying its most valuable asset, the soil. No one listened. Now he was testifying before Congress, pleading for funding, pleading for them to understand. The senators were impatient. They saw him as an alarmist. Bennett knew the forecast. He knew a dust storm was on its way. He began to stall. He extended his testimony. He answered questions with long, detailed explanations. He was watching the clock. He was watching the sky. Then it happened. The room begins to grow dark. A yellow-brown haze fills the windows. Senators look around, confused. Midday in the nation's capital turned to dusk. The dust from the plains, from Oklahoma and Kansas, had arrived. It filtered into the chamber. Bennett pointed to the window. "This, gentlemen," he said, "is what I have been talking about." He needed no other argument. The Soil Conservation Act was passed. America was finally ready to fight back. Young men from the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, plant lines of saplings. A farmer uses a new technique, plowing along the contours of a hill. President Roosevelt's New Deal attacked the problem. The government paid farmers to use new techniques, contour plowing, terracing. The Civilian Conservation Corps planted over 200 million trees, a Great Plains shelter belt, a wall of green to break the wind. The government bought back ruined land. They began the slow process of nursing it back to health. Cattle carcasses are piled high, being disposed of. But the solutions were not without their own betrayals. To raise crop prices, the government ordered the slaughter of millions of livestock. Hogs and cattle were killed and buried, while people across the country were starving. It was a brutal economic calculation that felt like madness to those on the ground. A healthy field of wheat sways in the wind. The sky is a brilliant blue. A modern irrigation system sprays water. Eventually the rains returned. The grass grew back. The Dust Bowl as a historical event ended, but its lessons are etched into the land itself. It was never just a story about weather. It was a story about human ambition, about ignoring the limits of nature. It was a warning. A map shows the massive underground Ogallala Aquifer. A graphic shows its water levels rapidly declining. Today, the breadbasket thrives on water pumped from deep underground. An ancient aquifer that is rapidly being depleted. The same short-term thinking. The same drive for profit. The same potential for catastrophe. The dust is gone. But the betrayal of the land and the lessons of the past are truths we forget at our own peril.